be a sponge, and then bring the juice.
By focusing on your improvement, by focusing on your progress, and eliminating any fixed mindset that you may have and acts of perfectionism, then you encourage your own mastery.
On some level, we do what we want to do 24 hours a day. Now, sometimes it may not seem like that, but if I'm choosing to work instead of sleep, what I'm actually saying is keeping my job is more important than sleeping.
I'm tired of this. I'm tired of getting beat. What can I do to get over this hump? So mentally, that's when I kind of put that forefront, like, hey, it's either all or nothing.
I like to put failure in quotations because I don't believe that failure is true failure if you're looking at it with the right mindset.
The truth is, the journey to greatness is hard. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes focus, and every day you have to decide what you value, what you want to pursue, and what you want to achieve. And if you dig deep enough, if you push hard enough, we all have what it takes to be great. Welcome to the Edge of Greatness. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I have with me a very special guest, Julie Fournier, founder of Basketball is Psychology and the author of The Art of Embracing Adversity. Thank you so much for taking time today to join us. I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. So tell me, Basketball is Psychology. Tell me more.
Yeah, so I was a sophomore in college, and I kept hearing my coaches say it's all mental. And I'm thinking, okay, if it's all mental, why don't we spend any time working on the mental side of the game? And at the time, I was an exercise science major when I was starting to, have this realization. And I actually decided to change my major to psychology because I was like, well, the more I learn about the game, the more I see how mental it is. Basketball is psychology. So that's kind of where the name came from and how it started.
I love that. Why do you think we don't spend as much time on the mental side as we do the other areas? Everyone, you see videos of people training and lifting weights, you see people doing skills and different things that are applicable to the game. Why do you feel there's this disconnect from the mental side, that we don't spend as much time or we don't appreciate what it is that we're getting from that time that we put in there?
Yeah, I think the mental side of the game is a lot less tangible. So I think people have a lot harder time, putting in the work in that way. Because, you can pick up some weights and you feel sore the next day and you're like, all right, I'm making progress. With the mental side of the game, you'll probably feel the same the next day. You won't see that dramatic progress as much, but it's just as important. And you are making a lot of progress, even if you can't feel it in the same physical way as you do with weightlifting and working on your skills and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't think people would want to do it if they woke up every day with a headache, right?
Yeah.
So what I really want to dive into with you today is the adversity side of things. I think that's something that, one, I think is extremely important, but also something I feel we don't really embrace, much like the mental side of things. But when I think of adversity, when I think about the ability to take on tough things and improve, we're so drawn to adversity. We love comeback stories. We love movies that have great amounts of adversity. But when it comes to our own personal growth and development, we tend to shy away from it. What makes it so difficult for us to embrace our own adversity, but enjoy and appreciate everyone else's?
Yeah, so I think we love this idea of a comeback story and, the hero going through something hard. But then when it happens to us, our first instinct is, why me? Why did this have to happen to me? We don't see ourselves as that hero on a mission. And I think if we could see ourselves as a hero on a mission, facing something hard, then it would make us, realize, hey, we're living in a story, and adversity is actually going to make this a good story, because adversity can actually bring out the best in us. When we get to our limit, when we face that hard thing, that's where we find out what we're truly capable of. Ease doesn't really bring greatness out of us like adversity does.
I love that. And I love the idea of making yourself the hero in your own story? Because I think too often we look at ourselves and we kind of downgrade what we're trying to accomplish or what we're able to do. And we don't think of ourselves as the hero in our story. And we don't want to put ourselves in the difficult situation because, again, it's hard.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a time when the adversity in your life led to something special after? Is there a story that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so when I was 16, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And what that meant is I had to go 6 months without playing basketball, and it was just in and out of the hospital. And it was actually during that time I reached out to a college athlete. His name's Adam Folker, and he had gone through injuries, and he actually introduced me to sports psychology. So if it wasn't for that hard time that I went through when I was 16, I never would have learned about sports psychology and I never would have found my passion. So it was during that hard time where I actually realized my passion. So without that, I wouldn't be where I am today.
See, and I think too many people look at the negative and they live in that moment of discomfort and they don't think about, okay, just keep pushing through, find your way out. And then when you get a chance, you can look back and discover what you learned from that moment. We always get stuck in that moment and we just kind of, well, this sucks. I'm going to change direction and go the other way instead of trying to persevere through the difficult stuff.
Yeah, and so much of it has to do with where our focus is. Because if we focus on, why me? Why did this have to happen to me? We're not going to learn anything during that hard time. If we focus on, hey, what can I learn from this? What is this teaching me? How can I get stronger because of this? Then we'll be a lot better off if we focus on that.
Do you think that people struggle focusing on looking past because they're not sure why they're doing something in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. I think we tend to play the victim because it's a lot easier than having to be the hero in the story. We just sit there and act helpless and wait for someone else to come rescue us. That's a lot easier than, saying, "Hey, I'm in control of my life. Even though this hard thing is happening to me, I can still, take control, grab the pen and write a better story for myself."
Do you think if we went out, and I'm curious about this because this is something I just kind of thought of, if we had bigger dreams for ourselves and bigger goals and aspirations to what we want to accomplish, do you think that would help us become the hero in our own story? Do you think that's part of the issue here is we don't strive for big enough things? Or am I completely off base with that?
No, you're absolutely right. Heroes are on a mission. They're not just, going out, working their 9 to 5 job and just trying to get by. They're on a mission. They have something they want to achieve, and nothing can stop them from reaching that. Yes, they'll face adversity, but that'll change them for the better. So I think heroes do have to be on a mission. They have to have big goals and big dreams.
So speaking of missions, what is your mission right now? What's the journey that you're on?
So my mission is to help basketball players reach their full potential. And I do that through teaching the mental side of the game, but also shining a light on mental health for athletes because I feel like that's something that gets ignored a lot in our sport.
I would agree. I think the mental health side, especially, in our heroes in the games, we think they're invincible. We think they're unstoppable. And part of me wants to go and kind of look at the recent Olympics, for example. Did you get a chance to watch any of that? Did you see kind of what happened there?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so what I really want to know is when you first saw the Simone Biles situation happen and it kind of started to unfold, what were your initial thoughts when she pulled out and stopped mid-competition and you didn't know what was going on?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, it's important to understand what's at stake in her sport. It's not track where, if you're not in the right headspace mentally, you just look slow. It's like this is a dangerous sport. You could fall and hit your neck if you don't do well or you're not mentally there. So I think it was super important that she was strong enough and courageous enough to say, hey, I'm not in the right headspace to do this. I don't have it in me to perform at the level I need to perform at. So I need to put my mental health first because it comes at a cost when you're performing at that high of a level. And she couldn't afford to sacrifice her mental health.
I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of people because I see it from both sides. I understand, you have people on one side going, well, how are you the best in the world? And then walking away in this big moment. And then I obviously see it from the athletic side of it where, if you mess up in this moment, you could potentially die. And you also, as the athlete, are the only one who knows exactly what you're going through. So as an athlete who's struggling, who's dealing with this adversity and maybe going through it in a different way, and maybe not as a big a scale, obviously Simone Biles, how do we encourage them to own what they're feeling and to seek help? I guess I know, how do we get them to get out of that way of thinking that I have to push through, I have to be brave, I have to be courageous, all of these things that, people want to bring up. When she walked away, they're like, well, goats don't walk away. And I was like, okay, well.
So there's this great story about two lumberjacks. And every day they start chopping wood at the same time. Every day they stop chopping wood at the same time. And every day one of them disappears for about an hour in the middle of the day. And every day that lumberjack ends up chopping more wood than the other lumberjack. And this went on for months. And finally, the one lumberjack is like, where do you go for that hour? And he says, oh, I go home and I sharpen my axe. And I think that's what Simone Biles did. She sharpened her axe. So if athletes could understand that, maybe you'll get where you're going faster if you actually take a step back and you sharpen your axe.
That right there is awesome. I hope somebody gets that and uses it for themselves, because there's so much value in that, to understand that, the tools we have are what gives us the opportunity to be successful. And if your tools are dull and weak and not the right ones, because you're not giving yourself the right chance to succeed, then you're going to find yourself in a troubled spot. And I think that's fantastic. What I want to go to from here is I saw a tweet you put out the other day, and it was a how it started, how it's going. And it was a picture of, basketball is psychology to start. And then another picture with Gino Auriemma sitting at his desk. And I believe your book is sitting on his desk. Is that the idea behind that? Or have you built a relationship with him? Have you made connections with him yet?
I have not, but that's one of my goals.
There you go. Yeah. No, I think that's really cool. So when you first wrote this book, did you ever feel like this is something that you were going to see on all these coaches' desks like Gino? And I mean, that's pretty impressive right there.
No, I thought I would sell one copy and it would be to my mom. I had no idea what I was doing. I had, no marketing budget, nothing. I just decided I was going to write a book for athletes going through this pandemic, and for any athlete who was going to face adversity. And I just hope for the best from there. And it's taken off further than I could have imagined.
Do you find you're getting feedback from people who are not basketball players as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my parents share a lot of stuff of mine, and they have friends, one of them who has shared the book throughout AA meetings, and I never could have seen that coming.
I think that's what's so special about the sports tie into real life, is that there are a lot of lessons we learn through athletics that we can translate into our life after sport. And, adversity is one of those things that no matter what you do, you're going to face adversity. It's part of life. That's part of what you're going to go through as you get older. You're going to lose loved ones. You're going to have car accidents. You're going to have bills that you can't pay. Those are things that are going to happen. You're going to lose a job. You're going to fail at an interview. The embracing of adversity, I think, gives us such an advantage and edge to continue to pursue a high level of excellence as we continue to grow and develop. And what I want to see from this is, how do we get more people to, one, get their hands on your book, but two, understand that when we go at something, we have this understanding that, look, stuff's going to happen. I'm going to power through. I'm going to move the ball forward and push the boulder up the hill, whatever phrase you want to go with. How do we get them to go around this negative look at what adversity is?
Yeah, so one of the stories I talk about in my book is about the boll weevil. And the boll weevil swept through the town of Enterprise, Alabama, and destroyed all their cotton. And they were a cotton producing town. That was, how they made their money. So their economy was just being devastated by the boll weevils. And one farmer was so broke, his banker said, you cannot afford another season of planting cotton. You have to plant peanuts. And he did so well that the whole town also started producing peanuts. And within a few years, they were the largest peanut producing county in the United States. And so, what adversity does is it makes us reevaluate what we're doing and find a better way. So, I think when adversity happens to us, our first thought needs to not be, why me? It needs to be, okay, how can I find a better way? And that'll help us embrace adversity and learn from it.
I love that. I think that that's such a crucial thing because I've always been a big believer of when a door closes, that pressure, if you think of it as in you're in a room, if when that door closes, the pressure of that door shutting is going to push open something else. So if you think of all the doors are in the room and they're all just kind of slightly shut and then the door shuts, that air is going to push something else open. You just have to look for that door that all of a sudden now you see light coming through. And I think that's the key to all of this is that when you face the tough moments, where do you look next? You know, how do we find that advantage from there? So when you were writing your book, obviously you were writing it during a pandemic, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Did you think that the adversity you were facing was helping you with that? Or do you feel like you've already had faced enough to know kind of the path you wanted to take the story? Or did it evolve with as you wrote it?
Yeah, it kind of evolved as I wrote it. I mean, I had a slight plan for maybe the first two chapters, and I wasn't really sure. I didn't even know the title until after I finished the book. So it was kind of just, I had learned a lot from the adversities I faced in my life. So I felt qualified because of that. But it did evolve a lot as I wrote it.
Do you present this story to teams at this point? Have you worked with some teams?
Yeah, I presented it to several teams.
Do you find that they change the way they approach practice and difficult things and the games when they lose and stuff like that, after having heard some of the lessons from the story? Or is it something that it doesn't really happen overnight? It's kind of like you said, you have to continuously work the process of it and grow from it. Or is it something that you can start to flip a switch more or less?
I think it's something you can start to flip a switch with. So one of the examples I give is during a tryout in basketball. Coaches specifically put in a super hard drill at the beginning so that it weeds out the quitters who don't really want to be there. That's what adversity is. When it gets hard, good. It means you have the chance to separate yourself. So I think I've seen a lot of players flip the switch in that way when they realize, all right, when it gets hard in practice, that's my time to shine. That's where I can separate myself and really learn that, hey, this is just a dip and people are going to quit. I'm not. I'm different. I'm going to push through the adversity.
I've heard you mention the dip several times. I listened to a conversation of yours with Connor Bestie, and I've seen some of this stuff that where you mentioned the dip. Can you go more into what that is? What's the dip?
Yeah. So the dip is that long, hard process when you're learning something new, like how to play the guitar or something like that, where you want to quit. You're not really seeing the results and you're just pouring more and more time into it. But if you keep going just a little longer, that's where you see a lot of the rewards and a lot of the progress. So a lot of people quit when they're in the dip. But if you can be one of the few who keeps going, then it'll pay dividends.
I love that. I love that. Do you think that the dip happens at different points along the journey for different people, or is it something that we're working at something and then we all kind of face it around the same point of, I guess, our mastery of our attempt at mastery? Is that something that happens around the same time, or is it very different for different people?
Yeah, I think it's different for different people, but it happens to us all and it all looks pretty similar when we're in it.
So what does it kind of look like from when we're in it? Is it one of those things where we actually regress in our abilities, or is it more like a plateau? Like we're making great progress, we're climbing the hill, and all of a sudden we're like, I can't go any higher. What's going on? I feel like I'm in this same spot over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's kind of that plateau where you feel like stuck and you're almost regretting, like, what did I get myself into? Why did I start this? I stopped making progress. Should I just give up the whole thing? But that's where you need to push on and keep going.
Do you have any tricks for people when they get into the dip to help them feel, I hate the word motivation because I think motivation is so weak, but keep them going to give them some momentum, I guess?
Yeah, you have to tell yourself that that is just a dip, because a lot of people, when they hit that dip, they tell themselves, all right, I've stopped making progress. I guess this is it and I'm going to quit. But if you can see it as, this is weeding out the quitters who aren't really as dedicated as I am, I'm going to keep going. So it's going to pay off for me. If you keep going, it will pay off. If you quit, you lose all of your progress. So keep going.
I like that. I think that's a valuable thing for a lot of people because, like you said, we're all going to face the dip. It's going to happen, especially if you're pursuing something to a high enough level. You're going to reach a point where your skill and your knowledge match up and you're going to have to either learn something new or gain some new skill to surpass that. And that's going to take time. You know, there's always a big, I like to call it the downhill slope to start to give you momentum up the hill. Like when you first start, you're like, oh man, I'm learning all these new things. Look at how great I am. I'm so good at all this. And then you start to go up the hill. And it's like, well, that's slowing down. Why am I not going as fast? What's going on? And then the plateau hits. You're like, well, I'm as good as I'm going to get, I guess. And that's where that mental side, like you're talking about, you have to continue to try to create more momentum and learn and grow past that point and push through the ceiling.
Exactly.
When you think of the word, I want to dig into, I said something earlier that made me want to question what you thought. When you hear the word motivation, what do you think?
I think of something that kind of sparks you to keep going or to get going.
Do you think people rely on being motivated too much? Or is it something that we can use as a fuel to achieve goals and dreams?
I think it's both. I think it can be used as a fuel and you should try to motivate yourself. But at the end of the day, motivation is overrated because you're going to have days where you wake up and you go to read a motivational quote and it does nothing for you. And those are the days where you're going to have to choose discipline and get it done anyways, no matter if you feel motivated or not.
Yeah, I thought I heard you say something along the lines that you decided to take action at some point when it was coming to writing this book. You weren't sure what to do. You weren't sure where to go, but you decided to take action. Am I accurate in that, or was it something else you were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's that, and along with starting the company.
That's what it was. It was the company.
I didn't think I was ready. I didn't think the book was ready, but I just have to, push send and take action and ship it.
Did you find that you increased your motivation after taking action?
Absolutely. I mean, so many times I've seen that motivation follows action. Motivation is not a prerequisite to taking action. Studies have shown that as you get to work, as you take action, then the motivation comes.
So when you were first building your company, you were first starting this idea, how did you overcome the fear that is associated with taking a risk like that?
Yeah, I put starting it off for months and months. I was like, it's not ready. I had blogs ready to send, tweets ready to send. And I still was like, I'm not qualified. I can't do this. I'm just a sophomore in college. What coaches are going to listen to me? And it came to December 31st, 2018. And I was like, all right, it's a new year, new me. I'm just going to start taking risks and I'm just going to go for it because what's the worst that could happen? And that's when I pushed send on my first blog and the rest is history.
So to circle back to the adversity, what adversity have you faced along the way when it comes to building this new company of yours and this business that you've learned pieces and you've grown from because of the risk you took to take a chance on yourself?
Yeah, most of the adversity was just myself telling myself I'm not qualified. And that's a dumb narrative. So what I've had to do is I've had to take these dumb narratives of I'm too young, no one's going to listen to me. I'm not qualified. I don't have the experience. And I just turn it into, hey, I'm a student. I've worked, I've learned, and I'm going to help and I'm going to share what I've learned.
I love the idea of the self narrative being an adversity, because I think a lot of times people think of adversity as something external, not the internal thoughts and difficulties of you overcoming your belief in yourself. And I think so many athletes and so many people out there have those same thoughts. And it's cool to hear how you took a risk and how you overcame this adversity that was internal, that was telling you like, you're not ready, nobody's going to listen, all these different things, and going, you know what? I don't even care anymore. Here we go. I'm ready to take that risk. And you overcame that adversity. And now you have a book out. I believe you were just finishing another one about daily motivational, the 365 days of motivational quotes and things of that nature.
Yeah, that one just came out too.
And you're doing all this stuff, but it all started with that. All right, I need to overcome and take this step. How do we get more people to have that faith in themselves to just take a leap of faith and jump off the edge and go, you know what? I'm either going to sink or swim, and that's okay, because I'll figure it out as I go and just jump in the deep end.
Yeah, my junior college coach used to tell me the worst thing someone could say to you is no. And if you don't ask, it's already a no. So you might as well just ask. And I think that is what really got me to start taking risks but also it's having those wise voices in your life. I remember one time I was talking to a friend and I was like, I'm just not creative. And she's like, you've written, 2 books now. You've combined basketball and psychology. That is a dumb narrative. So we need friends like that to call out our dumb narratives and help us, talk more positively to ourselves.
Yeah, I think another thing too is when you're on the path to excellence, you're trying to achieve this greatness. We mentally tell ourselves that we're never there. Do you think that's true with most people who are really pushing themselves to the highest level possible? That even when they achieve a high level, when they achieve excellence, they achieve greatness, in their mind, do you think that they still sit there and go, I've got so much more to learn. I've got so much more to do? Or do they ever get to a point where they're like, I've got it. I made it. I've achieved mastery.
Yeah, I think everyone just keeps going and they keep winning and they still feel like, I haven't done enough. I haven't made it yet. But I think it's all about falling in love with that pursuit, um, falling in love with the process, that happiness of excellence.
Happiness of excellence. Okay. I remember you talking about this. This sparked a thought in my head, is where you said something about the rose colored view of the past. You were talking about how we look at things that happened through a rose colored lens. Can we dig more into that? Because I think we look at the loving the process as just hard work and difficulty. And we look at like the way things used to be as like this easy, great thing that we could do. So we don't want to push ourselves into this new unknown, this difficulty, the things that we're going to take risks on. We're like, I'm really happy where I'm at. But a lot of times that happiness is skewed, right? We're looking at things through the wrong lens and we're seeing things not for what they really were, but for how we felt like they might have been.
Yeah, so rosy retrospect is our tendency to focus on the past and only remember the good times. Like even now you see people like, "Oh, I miss quarantine, those were the days. That was so fun." Even though things are getting back to normal. And when we were in quarantine, we were saying, "I can't wait for things to get back to normal." So our tendency is to only remember the good times when we look back.
Do you think that that could give us strength to push into difficult situations? Because eventually when you look back on it, you're not going to remember how hard it was. You're just going to remember about, those were some good times. I got some things done and now look at where I'm at. Do you think that can help us if we understand, like, look, we're going to embrace this difficulty. We're going to embrace the suck, as they say, and we're going to go forward. But when we look back, we're going to be like, man, that wasn't so bad, was it? Do you think that
Yeah,
could help us?
it helps us see that there's positives in everything that we go through. Even through those hard times, we look back and we see, hey, there were some good times in there as well.
Definitely. Definitely. When you are working on your current projects, when you're trying to build this understanding of the mental side of the game in basketball, how do you apply that to your own life?
That's what I love about psychology because, you can have conversations about business or science or stuff like that, but we live psychology every day. So most of what I work on, I'm just giving advice to myself as I work on it. Everything I write about, I take it and I apply it to my own life because psychology is so practical.
Do you currently coach right now? Are you working with a team?
So I just finished the AAU season, but I was working with a team,
Okay. Well, it was guys or girls basketball team.
girls.
Okay. Do you find that, have you ever worked with a guys team? Because I'm curious, do you find it easier to teach girls the mental side versus boys, or is it pretty even across the board?
I haven't really worked with guys as much, but it seems pretty even across the board from what I've seen.
Okay. Because in my experience, so I've had some experience with basketball, I'm sorry, not basketball, volleyball, baseball, and softball. Obviously, two of those sports were with female teams, and the baseball is obviously the men's side. I found it very rewarding working with the female athletes because I felt like they were more open to the idea of the mental side than the guys. And now maybe it was just because they were high school kids, but I was curious as far as, have you seen studies or done any, I guess if you have not coached much with the guys, it wouldn't fit with what you're working with, but that you found the females take it in pretty well.
Yeah, I haven't seen any studies on it, but yeah, I do think the females take it pretty well. I don't know so much about the guys, but yeah, the team I work with took it pretty well.
Awesome. So what's next for you on your journey at this point? Now that you got the book, you've released the new one, You're starting to grow the business and the coaching. What's the next step for you?
So I'm taking 1 year off before I go to grad school, and I'm writing a third book called What Makes Great Teams. And I'm spending the first 6 months researching all the books that have been written and all the studies that have been done on teams. And then in the next 6 months, I'll go and I'll observe teams and interview them and compile a book after that.
Gotcha. Have you lined up any of the teams that you're going to go and watch and be around?
I haven't yet, not yet.
Okay. I was just curious as who are you thinking you might reach out to?
So Doc Rivers is a subscriber of mine, so I'd love to spend some time with the 76ers. And then I have several other college teams in mind.
Do you think that the mental game changes as the level of performance changes? Because you mentioned Doc Rivers in the NBA, and then you mentioned college, and I'm curious if at high school it's even different, more different, or do you feel like the pieces of the mental game are applicable across all levels equally? I mean, I'm just curious as far as where you think you get the most bang for your buck, maybe, I guess, with the mental game.
I think the higher level you get to, the more mental it is. You look at how much Michael Jordan paid attention to the mental side of the game, and he always said his edge wasn't his physical ability, it was his mental edge. So I think the higher level you get to, the more mental it's going to get. Like you see kids who don't even pay attention to the mental side of the game, and they're great in middle school and high school. Then they get to college and they fall apart because they've never really dealt with the pressure. So I think the higher you go, the more mental it gets.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with that, because I think when you get to those higher percentages, the difference between players is so much smaller that you need something to separate. You know, for those people to actually stand out at that level, there has to be something different. And it's not going to be physical, because everyone's lifting weights, everyone's doing drills, everybody's 6'6" to 6'10" and can jump and shoot and run up and down the court. So what makes them stand out? Nothing more than how they perceive the world around them and how they interact with their mind on a daily basis.
Exactly.
Do you feel like learning it earlier makes it easier later, or are we all going to have to go through those growing pains as we continue to progress, because the adversities are going to change and the circumstances are going to change?
I think the sooner in life you face adversity, the better off you're going to be. I think I had such an advantage in life because at 16, I faced some really hard adversity.
It's interesting to think about, because I feel like I handle adversity relatively well. I also got sick when I was in high school, and the doctors still I haven't, as far as I know, told my parents what it was. I got sick. I lost 40 pounds over 10 days, like just throwing up everywhere, couldn't keep food down. And it was just awful. It was like the most miserable feeling in the world. And then it was gone. But it was a hard 10 days. And the biggest thing wasn't actually being sick, but when I came back, like I was a shell of myself. I couldn't lift weights. I couldn't move the same. I was slow. The bat that I swung felt heavy. Like everything was just off. And it forced me to rededicate myself to the process of lifting weights, to putting in the work, to getting back to just to be where I was. But I think that momentum carried me beyond. And obviously I'm not encouraging people to go out and find a way to get sick or to obviously get, diagnosed with the disease. But how do we get more adversity into life for these young players to help them see that they can be stronger from it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say go out and do hard things. I started running 50Ks a few years ago just because I was like, adversity actually helps me. And I'm going to go find something hard and I'm going to beat it and I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to grow in the process. So I think the more you seek out those challenges, the better off you'll be.
What's something you incorporate in your practices to help make things hard for your kids?
I do a lot of pressurized situations. So, if you make the shot, then we get water. If you miss it, we keep going. So stuff like that just makes things more pressurized.
Yeah. So, and obviously the bigger the pressure, the more they have to rise to that occasion.
Right.
Do you feel like that helps them in the big moment of the game now that they've experienced it?
For sure. So every time they shoot, almost every time in practice, there's pressure. So when they get to the game, it's not new when the game's on the line and they have to shoot a game winner. They're used to pressure.
That makes sense. Do you think that by pushing kids and putting pressure on them during practice, we can avoid some of the mental setbacks that we see from kids who maybe have too much on their plate? Is there a way to like help them navigate that through the difficulties we give them? So when it comes up as an external difficulty, that they have the ability to navigate it better? Does that help them, or is it completely different?
Yeah, I think it helps them. I think the more that you put them in those situations in practice, the more they can figure it out there rather than having to figure it out in a game.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm even talking like beyond that, from the game standpoint to life. Like, obviously we're going to have sport pressures. There's always going to be some adversity or some difficult moment in a game. That's part of playing sport. That's what makes it so fun, is that we don't know the outcome, and there's going to be something that comes up where we're like, man, how do I get this? But by learning how to deal with it in practice and by learning how to deal with it in a game, do you think that helps them with dealing with adversity in life, like the loss of a loved one, or, getting grounded for being stupid at home, or those different types of adversities that come up, getting dumped by a boyfriend or a girlfriend? Those are high school dramas, obviously, that just, oh my God, my life's over. But if they have this ability to navigate the adversity that we've taught them through sport, do you think it translates to the life adversity that they end up facing later on?
Absolutely. I think sports are the greatest metaphor for life. And there's so many lessons that are inside the game that we carry over into life. And that's why it's so much bigger than just a game, because all the lessons you learn, you carry over with you into life when you face those hard things.
Awesome. No, I totally agree. I think that that's the biggest thing. That's why I love sports, is that everything happens and then you can relate it to something in your life. You can relate it to a moment that you've experienced yourself, or if it is a moment that you experienced in sport, you can go back and go, man, I remember this moment, and this is what I'm going to do now in this particular situation.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So as we're wrapping up here, what I want to know is, if people want to reach out to you and get a hold of you, they want a copy of the book, they want to see what you're doing next and stay in tune with the new project of What Makes Great Teams, where would you want them to connect with you at?
Yeah, so Twitter's probably the best place to find me. I'm at Ballas Psych, and my personal page is at Julie, 4 NIER.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave them with as we head out today?
I think we covered just about everything.
No, I definitely agree. I think we got a lot of really good things in there. I really do appreciate you taking some time today to connect with me and my audience. I think that there's going to be a lot of things that they can get from this conversation to dealing with the adversities that we're going to face throughout life.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. As always, guys, keep reaching for the stars, fall flat on your face. But remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. If you haven't yet, please take a minute now to subscribe and review our show. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But remember, no matter what happens, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast.